Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And we're back cooking up some more lore theories. Today, as I said I would, I'm going to be reading another amazing in-game book from the War Within expansion that has actually been available to us since the base version of the game released. There are other videos on this out there on YouTube. Mostly trying to actually formulate and construct the cosmic structure of what this book, Palawltar's Codex, explains to us. So this is another magnificent book. If you haven't watched my most recent video on the Murmuration Paradox book, you should definitely go and check it out. It's discussing energy states and the movement of energy in the WoW cosmos. It just gives you a significantly more scientific, nuanced take of the transference of energy in World of Warcraft, and for me, completely changed how I see the lore and the world itself. So today, we're actually here in Hollowfall, going for another book. Now, for those who are familiar, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but here in Hollowfall, down in Beladar's Bounty, there's a building here that actually has a quest that I recommend all of you do, but you don't actually have to do the quest in order to get this book. This is the last mage quest from Hollowfall. That's Wenrin Althal, and that's a very, very good quest. In this quest, you actually learn how plants store memory and how memory can be used for teleportation magics. That's insane. Like, that's actually insane. It's how I thought the Army of the Light or the Arathi were going to come through the Sunwell. I figured that perhaps the remnants from the High Elves that ended up joining the Arathi would have memories of their homeland and perhaps be able to teleport back using that. But anyway, highly recommend that quest, but not really related to what we're doing today. On the shelf back here, you have this book, Palawltar's Codex of Dimensional Structure. And this book is one of those books that's written in that obnoxious arcane scholar kind of perspective where, like, it's extremely, like, overcomplicated for no reason. So I'm going to be breaking this down to you guys in more simple terms today and hopefully making it more digestible. Now, unlike the Multiversal Energy Dynamics and Murmuration Paradox book, this book can actually be picked up and put into your inventory, although I recommend, just like in my last video, that everyone get this add-on, Lore Keeper. This is an amazing add-on. Since my last video, I've collected approximately like 60 more books, which was super fun. There's actually an achievement called Well Read that actually has a bunch of books from back in the day, from the Old Gods to the Ordering of Azeroth, the Charge of the Dragonflights, the Aftermath of the Second War. I mean, there are so many things in here. Things regarding the Lich King, the Old Empire of Ajakir, the Troll Wars, the 7 original human kingdoms. It is good stuff. So if you're a lore nerd like me and you haven't done this, which was kind of mind-blowing, but I guess I must be some kind of fraud because I don't have lore master either. I know. You should collect these books. Very, very worth it. But anyway, they're all stored and collected here in Lore Keeper. This is an amazing add-on that allows you to keep a catalog of all of the books, notes, little lore things in the game that you have read. And so through this, we can easily harken back to Palawltar's Codex, even if it's not in my inventory. There are filters for collected, not collected, and even class restricted. So I can even go and look at things like the Tome of Blighted Implements, which has all of the Warlock artifact weapon lore from Legion. There is a ton. Imagine collecting these for every class. Now you're really talking access to the lore, if you know what I'm saying. So there's a lot of this here in the game. But today, again, we're going to be focusing on Palawltar's Codex. Now, let's get into it. This is from the perspective of Arathi mages. So keep that in mind. Every time that you're reading a book, especially books in the game, but even books like Chronicle, which I'm going to reference again for this video today because it's very important and actually ties directly to what's being said in this book, these are perspective. So this is the perspective of someone from the Arathi Empire, presumably off on Avaloran, and knowledge that had been brought over and stored in tomes and books for others to use. Now, unfortunately for Wenrin, he's the only surviving mage from when the Hollowfall Arathi were teleported by Beladar down into Hollowfall and crash landed. So that's pretty tough and unfortunate, but he's had some magnificent breakthroughs and surely nothing bad will happen to him. So anyway, do that quest. But What I wanted to add to that was, because it's perspective, there's always the chance that it could be objectively wrong, but these are scientific observations of things in the WoW universe that, just like the book that I covered last time, can be proven when you actually look into the game, the environment, and the evidence that's been given to us previously. So let's get into it. Unlike our ancestors, we don't limit our thinking of the cosmos to monopole elemental phase spaces, a discredited notion rooted in ancient myths from old Arathor. A comforting, if technically incorrect, arrangement of the fundamental forces of the cosmos. What's very interesting here is that he's actually referring to the WoW cosmic chart that we see in Chronicle. Now, I know Chronicle gets a lot of flack nowadays because it went from being the only thing that people believed to something that people now think that they can't trust, but this is a representation of monopole elemental phase spaces. Simply put, what this boils down to is they used to think, back in the Arathor Empire, that the universe was made up of simple, separate elemental boxes, if you will, like fire, water. The idea, however, is outdated and it's wrong. Even if it was once a comforting way to imagine the world. Things are significantly more complex than this, but what this can kind of tell us is that this chart, this perspective given in Chronicle, as I deduced quite a long time ago, was a derivative of the Titanic perspective. So rather than this being literally created by the Titans, this is created by the Titan Forged. And this is actually corroborated in the book, Grimoire of the Shadowlands. In fact, I'll reference that for you now. On page 154 of Grimoire of the Shadowlands, it says, "In the course of my research on the works of the First Ones, a living soul from Azeroth who purported to be a scholar of some renown showed me a tome containing an elaborately painted illustration she claimed to be an accurate representation of how the cosmic powers relate to one another. I patiently asked questions about the origins of this so-called cosmology, as if I were hanging on every rambling word from the scholar's lips. When I learned that this woeful miscalculation of a chart had been passed down through the hands of her world's Titan-forged races, it told me all I needed to know about the absurdity of the tome to which she clung so zealously. Why, every word within was chosen so as to look favorably upon the Titans, as if their pantheon of order were the architects of a flawless cosmos. How typical of their kind to claim credit for that which they did not build, but inherited. As has been well documented, the language of the Titans uses the same word for created as it does for ordered. Such blatant hubris. The reason I want to point this out is because the author here is, Talora, is actually recognizing that this is passed down through Titan-forged perspectives. Now that's important because for those of you that know the lore of how the humans came to be in World of Warcraft, they're actually descendants of the Titan-forged. So the old myths of the Arathor Empire are derived from information that came from Titan-forged. So that's why the actual book in the game here is making light of this fact. Unlike our ancestors, we don't limit our thinking of the cosmos to monopole elemental phase spaces. They just have to use big words to confuse you. A discredited notion rooted in ancient myths from old Arathor. So this is no longer accurate. It's comforting to think of it this way. It's an easy way of looking at it of like, fire and water. But what happens when we mix fire and water? Well, maybe you get steam. There are combinations, things overlap, right? But let's move to the next page. One wonders if such quaint notions would have faded, but for creatures like demons and the old gods who work primarily through a single energy type. This conflation of culture and dimensional topology holds back so many otherwise promising mages. What they're saying here is that although demons are often seen as using primarily fel energy, and the old gods are seen as using primarily void energy, or perhaps even decay-related energy, it is a conflation that what we see them commonly use is the only thing that they apply to. This harkens back yet again to the Chronicle cosmology chart, where old gods are squarely aligned with the shadow, where the Titans are squarely aligned with order, where the wild gods are squarely aligned with life, but this is not the case. There are wild gods like Khonzut that are also related to disorder as the Loa of change, right? We have the Naru, which we can see can fade and exist as void Naru. I also would imagine that they have some order in them, considering that Zira says that they were forged during the great ordering of the cosmos. The undead and death, or the eternal ones in the updated chart from Chronicle Volume 4, it's not so simple that they all had the exact same alignment, right? The old gods, N'Zoth with his flame and shadow, Yogg-Saron with his necromancy, and Y'Shaarj with maybe more spiritual energy, or even perhaps blight or fel-related energy based on his art. The Titans, who all have different alignments as well. Eonar to life, Sargeras to fire and light, Amenthul to light and potentially void. Time is what most people would see that as. Norgannon to, more specifically, the arcane and frost and perhaps domination. Khazgaroth to earth and fire. Golganeth to wind and water. So, things are not so simply stuck in boxes like this. But this is how it's portrayed to us in a more simple way to understand it. The old belief stuck around mostly because some beings, again like demons or old gods, do appear to embody only one type of energy, but that's very misleading. And it's caused a lot of mages in the past to misunderstand how reality actually works. Things are combinations of powers. Very important to understand and take away from this, and I can show you evidence of this, and they posit some references to understand this concept as well. Put simply, very simple here, the cosmos appears as a hexateron. Imagine a four-sided tetrahedron internally extruded to form a multidimensional solid with 20 planes of existence, 15 transitory pathways, and 6 vertices where interferent patterns create monopolar expressions of cosmic forces. Holy shit, what a mouthful that is. What a mouthful that is. Let me simplify this for you. The universe is actually way more complicated than we think. Instead of a flat or simple model as posed in Chronicle or even by the brokers, it looks like a giant multi-dimensional shape, which in this case is called a hexateron. The shape has 20 planes of existence like the Emerald Dream, the Twisting Nether, the Shadowlands, 15 connecting pathways between them, right? I've discussed what I think those connecting pathways could be. And in some ways, one might even posit that the Twisting Nether is representative of the majority of those connecting pathways, but I digress. And 6 vertices, where forces overlap and sometimes produce what looks like pure elemental energy or energy types, which is what we see portrayed yet again on the Chronicle Cosmology chart. Holy, Fel, Necromancy, Shadow/Void, Arcane, and Nature. But it's not cleanly portrayed this way. I will show you what the closest two-dimensional approximation of this would look like, which in mathematics would be referred to as a 5-simplex, also commonly called the hexateron or Hix, is the simplest possible non-degenerate polyteron. Totally know what that means, right? It is the 5-dimensional simplex, and this is what it looks like. So, it's a hexagon in 2 dimensions, but you have to understand this is a 2-dimensional representation of a 5-dimensional object. We can't really even begin to understand visually what this would look like, because we live in a universe where we experience pretty much everything through 2 and 3 dimensions. You have your X, your Y, and your Z, perhaps adding a 4th dimension via time. The 5th dimension is an entirely different variable altogether. But this looks familiar, doesn't it? If you took this and tilted it to be straight up, guess what it looks like? It looks a lot like the 6-pointed object and dimensional representation of reality that we see in Chronicle, right? What the closest thing that I would actually say that you would find to seeing this would be a D20 die. It would look kind of like one of these, roughly. What's very interesting is that you can actually find objects very similar to this in Dornogal. Let's go take a look. So for the astute observers among you, you may have noticed that in Dornogal, they've been carving out of what I believe was referred to in some of the world quests as celestite. It's a interesting blue mineral, which we know very little about, but it looks to be perhaps arcane in nature. They've carved some different stones and shapes from them, perhaps their own interpretations of cosmic structures, and there are those that are more simple, and there are those that become more complex, up to the largest example, which actually sits in a pool here in the middle of Dornogal, in a pool that actually looks relatively similarly shaped to, yet again, the Cosmic Forces chart. But on here, we actually have an object which may be the Earthen's interpretation or understanding of what this structure would look like in 3 dimensions. And as you may note, it looks very similar to the Hexateron, and it looks very similar to the D20 dice. Perhaps not perfectly the same, but it is an RPG style game, so having it be related to the construction of a D20 dice, I feel like is extremely fitting from guys like Metzen, among others, who created the story and world of this game, who are huge D&D nerds. I feel like this is very fitting. This is a dice, for those who don't play D&D, that you would use in D&D for tabletop RPG games and things like that. So I find that just extremely fitting. Now, there are people, like I've said, that have made efforts to try to actually chart everything in the cosmos to one of these objects, but I'm just going to say right now, I don't even know if it's possible. It's extremely fucking difficult, because all of the ways that we can attempt to represent it through 3-dimensional construction are, of course, limited to 3-dimensional construction or 2-dimensional construction. So you might have to chart each part individually and then kind of create a hypothetical model where they're put together. But I would also say that I don't know that we have been given all of the information that we need to fill out this chart, especially in terms of transitory pathways, the 15 transitory pathways, or the 20 actual planes and layers of reality that are mentioned. But let's get back to Palawltar's Codex, because there is more information here. But again, put simply, this just kind of goes to show how advanced the Arathi Empire actually is. Other extremely advanced civilizations include the Eridar, or Draenei, as we know them now, the Apexis Arakoa. The Earthen are pretty darn advanced, especially with their advancements in memory crystals. The Apexis also had memory crystals, and the Draenei can also store souls and presumably even memories inside crystals as well. And then we have, of course, the Koreshi, some of the most advanced civilizations out there. I do think that the Arathi are probably more technologically advanced than any civilization on Kalimdor as it stands right now, based on what I've seen from them, the language that they use, and the way that they believe, anyway, that they have an understanding of the structure of the cosmos is, as I understand it, pretty far beyond anything that we have experienced in broken, post-Pangeal, continental Kalimdor. So with that being said, let's go on to the next page. Singular energy types. This is a really important one. Singular energy types are unstable, according to Ogden's law, and thus they bind to one or more secondary elements. Now, when something is made a law, it's been tested rigorously. It begins as a theory. It is tested over and over and over again until the point where we can say with absolute certainty, at least with the information that we have available to us right now, this is 100% replicable and correct. So this is something that the Arathi have spent a lot of time coming to the conclusion of, not something to be scoffed at. And thus, these unstable singular energy types bind to one or more secondary elements. This is so important, because this could explain why things like Beladar shift from light to void. Things want to bind with other things so that they can remain more stable. For those that remember the quests leading into and involving the storyline of Undermine, remember that Kazhamite was actually able to stabilize Black Blood. Let that sink in a little bit. Now, what factors may be at play there? I mean, Kazhamite, I think, definitely is going to be related to spirit or life energies, personally. Maybe even chaos mixed in there. While on the other side, we have Black Blood, which does take this red appearance, which is part of why I would associate it also potentially with life. But then there's obviously some void corruption in there too. Xalatath makes that pretty darn evident. But while they kind of exist individually, they actually become even more stable when put together. So again, this could be why things like Naru and things like Beladar shift unstably, because perhaps they need an additional component bound into them. Think of perhaps like the citrines, and which actually look very similar to these, and golden stones that we find out on Siren's Isle. Those are specifically like gold and inspire a very specific kind of behavior in the minds of those who are exposed to them. If you haven't done the Siren's Isle questline, you really should, but I'm going to do a whole video on it because I actually made like a 17-page write-up on the lore that was exposed to us through the Siren's Isle, and it's really, really important, and I'd love to share that with you. Then you have something like Azurite, where you have the gold component and the blue component, and so it has actually a different effect, and I would assume is technically more stable than just something that is singular in nature. So it could be that while it's very similar and could to some degree actually be the calcified essence of the world soul, Beladar, I mean, as described in the Titan discs from Arcadis, it could very well be that it's a singled out essence or something of Azeroth that is not completely stable, and it's held within a crystal, perhaps to increase stability, but maybe it needs even more components to remain actually stable. And in this way, if we contrast and compare this with the multidimensional energy dynamics and murmuration paradox book, we can actually look at how perhaps this unstable singular thing, due to environmental frictions like time and entropy, fades from light to void. But if it was bound with something else, perhaps that would not be the case. Perhaps it would take significantly longer, or it would be inherently more stable. So again, singular energy types are unstable according to Ogden's law, and thus they bind to one or more secondary elements. The Firelands contains as much magma as it does flame. And this is why I referenced in my last video the construction of the Firelands. Now, again, you can ignore the spiritual aspect. I added that due to my own speculation. But if the Firelands is equal parts magma as it is fire, then that means magma, which is created by fire and earth combined, is one half of it, and fire is the other half, which means that the Firelands is 3 parts fire, 1 part earth. I took this notion and applied it to the other elemental planes as well. So for instance, Skywall, 3 parts air, 1 part water. The same thing with the Abyssal Maw, 3 parts water, 1 part earth. The same thing with Deepholm, 3 parts earth, 1 part air. Again, there's speculation in this. Don't take this as absolute fact. The only one with absolute certainty that I can say this about is the Firelands, because it's corroborated by the Arathi account. But when you get into this, you could start to ask the question, well, what happens if we have a realm that's 3 parts air, 1 part earth? Or 3 parts air, 1 part fire? Or 3 parts fire, 1 part air? This is where you come to realize I started trying to chart this and came to the conclusion, holy shit, there's so many combinations, and this is just for the elemental plane. Then what happens if we take multiple elements and bind them into one? What if something was 1 part fire, 1 part earth, 1 part water, and 1 part air? What do we get then? Are we mixing mist with magma? And at what point, like, do we stop and go, holy shit, there's way too many to chart? There's so many combinations that you can come up with. It's damn near infinite once you factor in all of the other cosmic powers and energies as well. So that's why I found this part so fascinating. And it's why the holy radiance of the sacred flame acts as an eternal beacon. Now that one is, that's an interesting way to word that. So simply put, no type of energy exists by itself for long. It always mixes with something else. For example, fire always comes with magma in the case of the Firelands, not just flame on its own. Holy light has a counterpart, eternal flame, an aspect that ties it to more than just one force. It's not simply one thing. So let's move on to the last page. Enough preamble, because that's all just preamble to the actual point. Let's get to the fun part. Logic proofs. Yes, maths. Everyone loves it. Yeah, let's do some math. We absolutely love that. Let's start with a foundational equation, and then it gives you this equation which we don't understand the actual definitions of the variables for, so it means technically very little to us. But the rest of this tome consists of 627, light reading, more pages of symbolic logic and their proofs broken up by the occasional anecdote about Mage Tower hijinks, and debunking of a historical myth or a truly terrible dad pun. So there's jokes in here, right? There's some humor, but they also have him diving into the technical math and proofs to show it, which make up the bulk of the book. So it's still silly, it's still written by a person, a human being, but a super, super fun book to delve into. Has fundamentally, just like the Murmuration Paradox book, changed how I see the WoW universe. So here's a real world analogy that will align pretty well to maybe explain what's going on here, okay? The old thinking. Imagine early science when people thought the world was made up of 4 classical elements, okay? Fire, water, earth, and air. It's simple, it's neat, it's easy to understand. That's like the monopole elemental phase spaces that they talk about here, which the old Arathorian mages had. some things in nature do look like they're just one element. Like lightning looks like pure fire, or water looks like just water, right? Similarly, in WoW, demons seem like they're powered by only Fel, and old gods only by void. But again, that's very misleading. They're not actually pure, they're just dominated by one thing, which can also open up the opportunity that something like the old gods, or even demons, existed in a state before that did not include void, and that void was a component added to it. Right, so keep that in mind. We're going to be talking about that in the future regarding some of the old gods, specifically N'Zoth. So buckle up for that. Now imagine in modern physics, right? We know everything is actually made up of atoms, molecules, and energy fields, which are way more complex and interconnected than the four elements model of old. Fire isn't just fire, it's chemical reactions, heat, light, and plasma interacting, right? That's what the mage is saying about the cosmos in this book, effectively. It's not 4 or 5 simple energies. It's a massive, multi-dimensional system where forces overlap, interact, and create hybrids. Now, besides the Firelands, let me show you an example of where this is happening. So here we are, down in the transitory pathway, if you will, between Hollowfall and Azj-Kahet. And when I first quested through this area, this caught my attention and blew my mind. So obviously, as you guys fly down here, I'm assuming most everybody has seen the roots of the world tree, presumably Iluna here, which was ripped out by Aman'Thul, which is very similar to the Yasharaj story, but I digress, and the Emerald Dream kind of energies that are presumably being carried by it. But what we learned in Dragonflight, at least in the area of the Emerald Dream that we visited there, is that the Emerald Dream is also held in stasis. There is a tremendous amount of order in the Emerald Dream. So, even though it is a spiritual realm, it is not only spirit that is present there. So, I'm operating under the assumption here that we have spirit and growth as a result, but also order, which is why we get some of the hues of blues, among other things. Now, for those that have looked around in Azj-Kahet, you will also notice that, of course, there's the presence of void, which could also be why we have more of the blues and purples that we see down here. There are actually like holes in the ceiling that look to have void energy kind of coming through them in the ceiling down towards the roof above the actual empire. Now, we actually see this energy, again, assuming that we have spirit and maybe even order energy going on here, coming down here into a place called the Breathing Pit. And what we're actually looking at here is we're looking at multiple forces combining. This blew my fucking mind when I saw it, because what's happening is the roots of the world tree are actually reaching down here into this pit, and at the bottom, they're actually reaching into black blood. And what is happening as a result? This purpley flesh, which we see very commonly with things like the old gods, N'Zoth specifically, is seemingly growing as a result of these two things combining. So we have the kind of spiritual and orderly energy, perhaps, of the Emerald Dream coming down and combining with the chaotic and void energy of the black blood. And its combination seems to give rise to a different type of energy. Now, I could be misinterpreting this. This could simply just be the black blood overgrowing and growing on top of this energy, and it's not a mix of energy at all, but rather one overtaking the other. But regardless, to me, it does seem like a combination of energies, right? We're looking at something that is perhaps not as stable individually, connecting with and binding with a secondary or maybe even a third or fourth power, and perhaps creating more stability. But what I think that this is also indicative of is that things like flesh, mortal flesh, dragon's flesh, maybe even demon flesh, these are things that are made up of many different components, right? And this is something that's also proposed in one of the Emerald Dream books on the nature of the dream that I referenced before, that the dragon writing about, you know, the dream and what the Titans were doing to it and stuff, realizes that the dragons must be made from more than just like life and order energy, because they're able to perceive fundamentally different things about the cosmos that the Titans perhaps cannot understand, right? And so they then surmise that if dragons are made up of many different forces interacting, so too must all mortals be. And that's what leads them into the question of, well, what is Azeroth? Is she a combination of all these forces, or is she potentially their source? So again, as we get closer to flesh, free will, even if this isn't exactly the flesh that we would have, we're getting closer to kind of the chemical or elemental combination that would lead to flesh. And as you have more and more components added to you, I think that this is effectively what leads to some degree to free will, to, again, of course, mortality, because you're a fleshy creature. You can die. You're not made of stone. You don't have an eternal soul like a demon. But there are some fundamental differences and interesting similarities, of course, still between mortals and demons and dragons. So maybe we'll talk about that more in another video. But I thought anyway that this was an example of different elemental, not even elemental. Don't think of it as like water, earth, air, fire elemental. I just mean like elements, almost more like the periodic table style, combining and mixing and leading to a different kind of growth. Because previously the black blood was pretty much inactive until Sargeras stabbed his sword into the planet, down into the heart of Azeroth, and that's when, according to the Arathi anyway, which they're wrong about, the Holofal Arathi, is when Beladar started shifting, and when the black blood, which is decidedly not very black, became active again. So again, this is really just an interesting fundamental alteration to how I view the WoW cosmic powers, the WoW cosmic forces. It is not so simple. It is not simply laid out as in Chronicle. That is a far too binary and comfortable way of looking at it. It is significantly more complex. So what this allows us to realize is that as we combine powers, we create new powers. And when you take those new powers and combine them with other combo powers, what do you get? You just get more and more and more and more combinations, and the possibilities become incredible. There are realms, for instance, like the one that the Drust come from. Chronicle Volume 4 remarks that the Drust, their realm, the Blighted Lands, Thros, exists in the Emerald Dream at a unique confluence of death and void energies. Like, that's a fucking crazy thing to say, because the Emerald Dream, as we know it, already has spirit, the Emerald Nightmare bringing in chaos or maybe even decay. Then you're adding, and that could be the result of void mixing with something in the Emerald Dream, right? Some kind of corruption. But again, the old gods are not strictly void. We know this. And then even death on top of that. Are we talking Maldraxxus green necromantic death? Are we talking blue domination death? Because again, the Drust do have domination masks. Like, they do have blue mind control masks that, Drust mask of dominance like this. I'll show you real quick. That is absolutely a domination helmet, and it's not done using domination runes. It's some kind of interesting binding, probably into like dark druidic or nature magic. We've actually been seeing this since BFA, and they make it pretty darn clear, especially in the Shadowlands questing in Ardenweald, that this is another form of domination. It has the correct color scheme and everything as well. So it just really begs the question, like, how many different combinations of cosmic powers and forces exist out there that we've just never really seen, or perhaps haven't realized are like right there in front of us. I cannot wait to learn more. Again, this is another book that has fundamentally changed how I look at the World of Warcraft universe and World of Warcraft lore, and I'm extremely excited to delve further into my other theories, keeping these two books, Palawltar's Codex, and again, Multidimensional Energy Dynamics and Murmuration Paradox books in mind. So here is yet another one for you. I hope you enjoyed the speculation, the theories, the cooking, and the recap and explanation of what Palawltar's Codex is trying to say to us. The hints at maybe the incredible advancements and technological prowess of the Arathi Empire. And yeah, I very much enjoyed making another video. So if you enjoyed, please smash that like button. Let me know that you did enjoy. Leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, your opinions, your interpretations. I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe if you like this content. If this gets you hyped up or interested in WoW lore again, that's what I'm here for. It's the best part of what I get to do, so thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you very much. Stay awesome, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace!